Hey guys, what is up? This is Zero here. We are on the main account doing another rune video, and today we are going to be going over a dungeon specific rune set. We are going to be going over the Violent rune set. This rune specifically drops from dragons and only drops from dragons. Um, you can get it in other places. You can get it from the Wish Fountain. If you land on the rune, it has a chance to come out of there. Um, if you get runes through the events or the runes through the daily login, they have a chance to be these also. But exclusively, they will only be dropping from dragons. This is another very highly sought after rune set, and um, primarily it's not a rune set that is used early. Um, it's definitely a mid game into a late game rune set. Um, the majority of the units that will be using violent sets are going to be units that you have built up a swift set on, and once you get a fast enough or an equivalent violent set, you will then replace the swift runes with the violent runes. Um, a lot of your monsters that you have on Swift will eventually get pulled over to a violent set. Um, some of your monsters that will do well on a violent set would be uh, could be your Inugamis. Um, although you don't necessarily need them because you will be building them as damage dealers, but it's something you could possibly do if you get some really good attack stats and damage dealing stats on a violent set. You could put them on a violent. Um, there are a few places in dungeons, there are a few places in the dimension holes where the extra turns to allow them to get their team ups up quicker could be handy, but they're not any of the Inugamis. The only Inugami you could put on Violent would be Bella. Mine is still on a Swift set because I have not been able to find a good Violent set for her. Your Mav is a good one to be put on Violent. His third skill resets cooldown, so as many turns as he gets to have that skill back up is going to be good for him. Both your Freyan and your Lauren, you would want both of them on Violent. Both of them have attack bar manipulation on their attack skills, so you want them getting as many turns as possible because when they hit things, it reduces their attack bar. Um, so both of them are going to be really good on Violent. You're going to want them really fast on Swift until you get them to be able to be really fast on Violent. Um, Late mid game, you would want both of them with a 200 plus speed if you can get it. Early mid game, when you have these build up, you would want to get them as close to 200 as possible. You won't really worry about getting over a 200 speed until you are later in the game. Um, these are probably going to be the first two and or the primary two units you will focus on to violent out, to get them on violent runes. Um, there are some attack monsters that will do very well on violent. Um, I don't. Aegir is one. You'd want him on a very attack heavy violent set, you want him taking a lot of turns. You want his third skill to be up as often as possible. His third skill um, does a strip and then puts the beneficial effect back on you. So you would want him on violent to get as many turns as possible, so you could get that skill up going. Um, you could do Vertiheal on a violent set. You could switch him over from a swift to a violent if you can keep his crit at 100%. You could totally go violent on him. Every time he would get a proc, every time he would get a turn, he would just keep filling the attack bars. So he could work on violent. He's one that could work on violent. Let's see, who else do I have that could work on a violent? Or that I have on violent. A lot of your support monsters, you could definitely would want to run them on a violent set. You'd want them to have those extra turns. Healers, you want them to have them extra turns so their heals are off a cooldown. You could put Veramos on a violent set instead of a swift set because of his passive. Every time he takes a turn, he removes a beneficial a debuff from everybody. Just one, but each time he takes a turn, he removes one. So he could definitely be put on a violent set. He would be a good one you could do if you can get him up to about 200 speed on a violent set. Um, the main thing that I have learned and that I have kind of grown to understand with violent is your transition set from some of your swifts. Once your violent set is able to hold 200 plus speed, because you are losing the 25% speed boost from the swift set, so you have to make that up with your violent set. My Fran is at a 186. I just have not been able to swap out enough of her violent runes. I also think some of her violent runes are still 5-star and not maxed out. So I've just been doing some work on getting some better runes for her to replace some of the violence. I did find a 6-star speed rune for her that's not too terrible. That's got a few defensive stats. I was probably going to drop that crit damage on there for an HP percent. I just don't have any grindstones left or enchantment stones left to do that with. But other than that, the rune's not too bad. As far as some of her defensive stats, she doesn't need that much attack. She doesn't need that much crit. It's just not what she's done. She's support. She's a attack bar manipulator, so you'd want some pretty decent accuracy on her. Probably closer to 50% would be better. But grinding and upgrading some of the stats would definitely make that a lot better. Some of these 5-star runes are not exactly in the best spot as possible. Most of them I kept just because of the speed and accuracy on some of them. But once you're able to start farming 5-star violent runes or better, 5 or 6-star runes, is when you would want to start looking at replacing swift runes. You would want to get your units decked out on as much speed as possible and then transition after that. Violent runes are also very important in the arenas because of the extra turns. And like I said, some of your attack units will be using violent runes. I don't have any of mine set up on them yet. But the only one that I did have set up on it was my Aegir. Just because I want him to keep stealing that beneficial, but I use him in dragons. He's one of my buff stealers, along with Lauren, who can strip the buff. Just so I have a good possibility of getting the immunity off of the dragon. But that is the violent runes. You can definitely use them on attack monsters, primarily in the beginning and early stages of the transition. You will primarily be saving them up for your supports, so that you can push a little bit farther. And then once you start getting a good mix of the 6-star violent runes, then you can replace the runes, if they're not already 6-star on your supports, and then work on getting the runes for some of your damage dealers and other monsters that you're going to build. Um, as far as gameplay, uh, dungeons, and the rifts and the rift beast, violent runes will most often be used on your supports. You won't necessarily need to get into putting violence on some of your attackers until you start playing around or really trying to grind through the arena, whether it's the RTA arena or the normal arena, um, or even some of the PvP guild stuff. That's where the violent runes would really come in more handy. But as far as just regular environmental gameplay, um, world boss, dungeons, TOA, primarily your supports will be using the violent runes. So you definitely want to rune them up first. Because not only will they be good in PvE stuff, but they'll be good in PvP stuff also. Um, those are my recommendations for violent. It is definitely one of the other more popular rune set, or mostly used rune set in the game, aside from Swift. As far as the 4 sets go, Rage is another really big one, and we'll go over those later. That's another one of the sets that will be on your damage dealers. You'll probably be swapping between, or you'll have different damage dealers built up with Violent, some of them built up with Rage. But those are my opinions, especially with the Violent runes. Or basically any of the rune sets you get from the dungeons, um, especially 5 or 6-star. Always keep speed runes or slot 2 speed runes, whatever the rune type is. Always keep them, take a look at them later. The slot 2 speeds are probably one of the hardest rune set to, or rune slot to get. So anytime you get a speed slot 2 rune where speed's the main stat, definitely keep it, look it over, mess with it later. Um, the stats, the substats that come on them, depending on if it's a rare or an epic or a legend, um, they could work on somebody. But I do know that the speed slot 2s are definitely one of the hardest rune to come by as far as the different slots. But that would also be my suggestion, is just to keep those. Otherwise, I will definitely get some other videos out soon. Been working on getting these out at least one a day. Um, but if they are helpful, if you guys are liking these, definitely leave some likes, comments. Um, Other aspects you guys want me to go over, I'm still doing the free to play account. I'm doing about a video every other day because I'm at that point where most of my progress on the free to play account is getting food at the moment. Not a whole lot has changed on that account, um, but it's mostly just been a food grind, so I can work on getting my core teams on that one up to 6-star. So that's primarily, I've just kind of gone down to doing a video every other day on that account, because I really don't want the videos to be, oh, got more food today, oh, got more food today, oh, got more food today. So I just kind of spacing those videos out now that I'm kind of stuck. I'm pushing into the mid game. Um, I would say mid game would be where you're into all three dungeons at least. Um, Giants, Dragons, and Necro. I'm fixing to get into Dragons on that account. So I'm early mid game. The team's coming together really good. Check out those videos. Um, but if y'all are liking these, definitely like and subscribe. I'm just going to keep getting these videos out just to help out any new people, returning people, or anyone that's just looking for some information. That free to play guide's going to go, it's been from the beginning all the way up to as far as I can push. I may do some PvP stuff with it, but primarily it's going to be a PvE free to play guide going from the beginning of the game all the way up to the in game PvE content, getting into all of the different rifts, doing R5, um, getting the dimension holes finished, doing all of the dimension bosses. Just that's what that guide's going to be, is just climbing up and doing all of those. Probably try to hit S rank on all of the different rift beasts. So that's where that guide's going. I may reach out to some other content creators and see if I can get a little bit more information on PvP. I know most of the game is kind of revolved around that, but for the moment, for just an entry level game, for an entry level person, PvE is your primary focal point, and that's where my videos are being pointed towards. Is definitely the PvE side of the game. I do plan on getting some information out on the PvP stuff, but that will probably be much later. But again, if you like them, definitely leave likes, subscribe. I release a video just about every evening in the US. So I definitely try to get those videos out there for you guys. But thanks for watching.